Unfortunately, sometimes justice depends on the lawyer. Righteous cases don't always win. Especially when those cases are against the heart-stopping power of the global apex corporations. No, it doesn't happen unless the lawyer has the skill to prevail against that kind of power. How do we develop those skills? You have to be ready, my first boss, Bob Kelly, told me. When I rose to argue, he would rip up my notes. When he heard another lawyer was having problems in trial, he would send me into the courtroom to take over, because I knew nothing about the case. He would have me argue motions in different courtrooms scheduled at the same time. It seemed like madness until I realized that this was training. I saw Bob win trials in little moments that snuck past everyone else. Like when one witness, a feared defense expert, tapped his fingers when Bob asked him how much he charged. I knew by then that some weakness had been revealed. Bob waited and waited and waited. He waited until the silence became uncomfortable, until this master expert witness muttered, "I resent the implication that I'm being paid to lie." Most lawyers would have never gotten that. They wouldn't have seen the opportunity. They wouldn't have waited for it to play out. And then, even if they had lucked into it, they wouldn't have noticed it because their noses were stuck in their notes. Too bad, because that trial was over. Bob had never mentioned anything about being paid to lie. It was what the witness was thinking. And Bob made sure we all understood that. Everyone in the courtroom. The truth came out. This witness was key to the defense, and he was being paid to lie. Bob told me in my first year as a lawyer that I must always be ready to seize a moment like that, even at my age, even with a witness far beyond my skill. What if I'm not ready? I asked. Be, he said. Just be. I used to think he meant be ready, but now I know he meant exactly what he said. Be. Just be. Exist in the courtroom, alive to the moment, with the skills you need already developed. How do you become that lawyer? During the Vietnam War, pilots in the U.S. Navy were getting killed at an incredible rate. But if a pilot survived his first few dogfights, that pilot would likely survive the war. So the Navy created the Fighter Weapons School, or Top Gun training, in order to give pilots the experience of those first few dogfights without the deadly risk. It worked. The survival rate skyrocketed. Lawyers can do the same thing. Take the time to hone your skills in realistic settings with good lawyers to mentor you, and do it again and again and again. There's no shortcut. There's always more to learn. But there's no other way, because the power of the global apex corporations and their influence grows by the day. It reminds me of a story in Zen. We have a strange view of what that word means, very different from the original meaning in Japan 1,000 years ago. In Zen, knowledge is based on experience, not on academics, not on intellectual ideas. You cannot understand things with your intellect. These things can only be understood through experience. And trials are the same way. What I tell you, you can understand in an academic way. You can understand on an intellectual level, but you cannot really understand what I'm saying until you have the experience, just like in Zen, in real Zen, in authentic Zen. And so this reminds me of the story in Zen about the young monk who asked how to become enlightened. Just sit 10 years, said the master. The young monk came back, not quite as young, 10 years later. What do I do now? He asked. Just sit. 20 years. It's the exact same thing if you want to be a trial lawyer. If you come back after 20 years, you know the answer. Just sit 30 years. It'll never end. You're always going to have to be fighting to make yourself a better lawyer if you want to beat the power of the global apex corporations. Let's look at one case and see how it happened. Here's the story. When Samantha got home from the park with her dad, she was dirty and tired. Her grandmother, Caridad, slipped her into the kitchen sink to soak and scrub. Then, as 2-year-old Samantha splashed around, Caridad filled the pressure cooker with water, chicken, and seasoning. She put it on the stove and turned on the burner. A few minutes later, the pressure cooker made a noise like a gunshot and started shooting steam out the side. Caridad grabbed the boiling hot pressure cooker, but it slipped and she dropped it on Samantha. Samantha was burned over 80% of her body. The doctors were able to save her, but they were forced to perform amputations on all 4 of her limbs. She spent a year in the hospital. The police were suspicious of possible child abuse and conducted a thorough investigation. So did the fire department and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. None of them found anything wrong with the pressure cooker. Other lawyers turned them down, said there was no case. When the family came to us, well, the facts seemed clear. The grandmother had bathed the granddaughter next to the stove, overfilled the pressure cooker, and then dropped the boiling hot pressure cooker into the sink onto the baby. That's exactly why other lawyers didn't want the case. But there was video of Samantha in the hospital, her little body wrapped in white bandages. She looked like a tiny mummy. "Help me," she says on that video, her voice weak. "Help me." So we hired our own product design expert and had him conduct a thorough investigation. He also found no defect. This little girl was the victim of a devious corporate cover-up, and they came this close to getting away with it. The Consumer Product Safety Commission didn't help her. The police and the fire department didn't find the corporate cover-up. Lawyers turned her down. They didn't see a case. It took us years to expose the cover-up and discover the hidden defect. Our own engineering experts missed it. We had to do our own testing. It was dangerous. Was it worth it? Is that the type of lawyer that I want to be, that you want to be? Was it worth it? You tell me.